Welcome to the Cheating Wife Stories channel. Have you ever had the gut sensation that something is happening right in front of your eyes, but you can't put your finger on it? Yeah, that's been me for the past few months, but I've been blowing it off. Amanda, my wife, is 6 months pregnant with our first child, and I assumed the distance between us was natural. Perhaps it's the hormones. Perhaps she's just fatigued from carrying our child. I was stupid. Last Friday night, everything broke open, and looking back, I still don't see how. I didn't see it coming. I was meant to be at a late business meeting that evening, but I finished sooner than expected, which made me eager to go home and possibly have one of those rare moments where we could relax and watch something idiotic on TV. When I arrived, the home was dark and vacant, so I assumed she was upstairs resting or something until I noticed her car was not in the driveway. I wondered if she had gone to the grocery store. I texted her and received no response. 30 minutes passed, followed by an hour. Still no response, and her phone was going directly to voicemail. I am not a neurotic guy, but something about that silence got under my skin, and I did something I'd never done before. I opened her laptop. I felt awful just looking at it, as if I had crossed an unseen barrier of trust. But at the time, I didn't care. The first item that appeared was a group chat. Her buddies were chatting about a party they'd all gone to, which I had no idea about. The messages were filled with specifics, including laughter about Amanda's crazy night in the pool. One of her friends wrote, "I thought I'd die from laughter." Despite being pregnant, she remains the life of the party. Wait, a party? My pregnant wife attended a party without telling me. I was dumbfounded. She made no mention of it whatsoever. And as far as I knew, she'd spent the entire evening at home relaxing. But evidently, she had been drinking, leaping into pools, and who knows what else. I continued reading, and things grew worse. Her friend Megan wrote, "I still cannot believe what happened to him." What was she thinking? Him. Who the hell was he? I could feel blood rush to my ears as I scanned through the texts, piecing together what had happened. A name came up. Jason. Some person I didn't know evidently got a touch too close to Amanda that evening. The group chat was filled with taunting comments and hazy inside jokes that made my stomach twist. I'm not sure what I expected to find, but certainly not this. Pregnant, partying, another dude. I was pacing around the living room at this point, my mind running faster than I could keep up. Where was she? What the hell was she doing? And why hadn't she spoken to me? 1 hour went into 2. By the time I heard the front door creak open, it was nearly midnight. Amanda strolled in, holding her heels in one hand and her phone in the other, with a smug little smile as if she had just had the time of her life. The sight of her struck me like a train. Everything I'd read, everything I didn't know, and everything I was going to learn. But that confrontation, that was merely the beginning. Amanda stepped through the door that night, her demeanor far too carefree for someone who had just returned from God knows where. She did not notice me at first, sitting in the dark, watching her like a hawk. She kicked off her shoes, stretched, and sighed deeply, as if she had just returned from a spa day. I stood up and tried to keep my voice cool. "Where were you?" She froze. That smile I noticed on her face disappeared in an instant, replaced with something colder and more calculated. Her eyes flew to the stairs as if she was already plotting her escape. "I went out with the girls," she explained, her voice sounding light, as if the solution was obvious. "Didn't you receive my text?" That was her first mistake. There was no text. I knew it, and she knew it. I stepped closer, my heart racing in my chest as I tried to keep it together. "You did not text me. In fact, I have been attempting to contact you all night. Your phone went directly to voicemail." She looked at me for a second, her face blank. Then she gave a gentle laugh, the kind that someone uses when they're trying to brush something off. "Oh yes, my battery died," she shrugged, holding up her phone as if it had somehow made things better. I didn't realize it until I was already outside. I nodded slowly, as if I accepted her explanation. But inside, I was boiling. I could not stop thinking about the messages I had seen. I knew she was lying, but I needed her to continue talking and digging her own grave. "It must have been a nice time," I replied, attempting to sound nonchalant. "Where did you go?" Her gaze shifted away for a moment, too long, and that's when I noticed it. She hesitated, calculatingly paused before responding. "Oh, we just went to Megan's apartment. A couple of us had dinner and hung out for a while." She forced a smile, walking toward the kitchen, as if the conversation had ended. But it wasn't, not even close. I leaned against the wall, arms folded, and watched Amanda's every move. Funny, because I just heard something else, something about a party. She paused in her tracks. I could nearly see the wheels working in her head, attempting to determine how much I knew and how much she could get away with. "Oh, well, it was more of a small gathering. You are familiar with Megan's personality. She invites a few guests over. Things become a little louder. Not a big deal." I couldn't believe what she was saying. I could feel the rage swelling in my chest, but I still craved more. I wanted to see how far she would go with this ruse. So this guy, Jason, his name tasted like poison in my mouth. Did he have fun at this modest get-together too? Her reaction was quick. She swung around, her eyes wide with amazement, but immediately concealed it with a phony laugh. "Jason, what exactly are you talking about? There was no Jason." "Adam, you're being ridiculous." "Am I?" I snapped, my tolerance finally running out. "I couldn't hold back any longer because, according to your group chat, you were nearly swimming with the guy. You did not simply go out with the girls, Amanda. You lied. You have been lying." The color drained from her face, and her mask fell for a second. Then she quickly put it back on. "Oh, you've been looking through my phone now," she snapped, her voice full of hostility. "What, you don't trust me? Is this it? Are you going to sit there and act like I'm the evil one because I attended a party?" She turned it around on me, as if I had crossed the line. It was enough to make my blood boil. However, that wasn't the worst part. "You weren't sober," I remarked, taking a step forward. "Drunk and pregnant. What the hell were you thinking?" She scoffed and rolled her eyes as if I were being unreasonable. "Oh, please, I had a single drink. One. Don't act like I've been partying all night." I glanced at her, barely recognizing the woman who stood in front of me. The lies were dissolving, yet she clung to them as if they were a lifeline. She wasn't even concerned about what she'd done, about how reckless and selfish she had been. But I wasn't finished yet. "We're having a DNA test tomorrow," I spoke, my voice cold and definitive. "I'd like to know whether the child you're carrying is mine or Jason's." Her eyes widened with amazement, then fury. "Are you serious now? How can you accuse me of that? Adam, you've absolutely lost it. This is ridiculous. Insane." I laughed, but there was nothing funny about it. "No. What is absurd is how far you will go to continue lying. But I am done with this game. We're taking that test first thing in the morning." Amanda stood there, her face rigid, her mouth clenched, the tension between us strong enough to cut with a knife. I wasn't sure what she would do next, but one thing was obvious. The truth was finally coming out. She stood still, staring at me as if I had just made the most preposterous accusation possible. But this was the worst part. There was no fear in her eyes, just sheer rage. Not regret, not guilt. Rage, as if I had no right to call her out, as if I were the one betraying her. "Do you believe I am cheating on you?" She spat, her voice sharp enough to pierce through glass. "I am carrying your child, Adam. So this is how you repay me. By making outlandish accusations because I attended a party." I was not having it. Not anymore. I took 2 long strides across the room, barely able to contain the rage boiling inside of me. "Amanda, this isn't just about the party. It's everything. Lying and creeping around, the sudden night out, the phone constantly on mute, your tiny hidden universe in which I'm evidently not permitted to participate. You didn't tell me about this guy, Jason. Why? She threw up her hands, exasperated, and paced the room, as if she couldn't believe what was occurring. There's no Jason, she yelled, her voice trembling around the edges. But the way she said it was too prepared and quick. God, Adam, he's merely a guy who was present. I barely spoke with him. You are exaggerating this situation. I took a long breath, trying not to let her gaslight me into questioning what I already knew. Right, that explains why your pals were laughing about it in the group chat, correct? About you and him becoming too close. So what was it? Just innocent fun. Because that's not how it appeared from where I was standing. Amanda's face twisted in annoyance, and her eyes narrowed as she considered her next action. She opened her lips to respond, but I cut her off before she could make any more excuses. You know what? I do not care what you say right now. I spoke, my voice slow and steady. You have lied to me enough. The DNA test is scheduled for tomorrow, and the results will be final. And if I discover you have been lying about more than simply Jason, I am done. The hush that followed was smothering. Amanda's cheeks reddened with rage and shock, but I could only see it for a second. Her composure slipped. There it was, a glimmer of something she did not want me to notice. Guilt. Panic. I wasn't sure, but it was enough to convince me that my doubts about her were not unreasonable. She quickly flipped the switch. She burst into tears, forlornly clutching her palms to her face throughout the act. Do you think I did that to you? She choked between heaving breaths. Do you believe I cheated on you when I'm carrying your baby? What type of person do you believe I am? I'm your wife, Adam. I cannot believe this. You do not trust me at all. I just stood there and watched her disintegrate, but something within me had moved. I'd watched this show previously, the waterworks, the deflection, putting the responsibility on me. This was not new. I'd been falling for it for months, perhaps years. But this time, it didn't work. I felt just frigid resolve. When her sobs subsided, she sat on the couch, peering up at me with red-tinted eyes, searching for any hint of weakness. She was playing her final card, thinking I would break. But I did not. We will see, Amanda. I spoke with a stone-like voice. We will see after the test. She blinked, as if she didn't expect me to stand firm for a second. I expected her to burst again, but instead she straightened up and wiped her face with the back of her palm. The tears vanished as swiftly as they had appeared. Fine, she said, her voice frigid and nasty. If that's what it takes to show you that you're being paranoid, fine. I will take the blasted test. She got up and went past me, slamming the bedroom door behind her. I did not follow her. Instead, I sat down and stared at the floor, my brain spinning from what had just happened. Amanda, I knew, the woman I married. She was slipping away. Perhaps she was never there in the first place. I wasn't sure about anything anymore. My thoughts kept returning to that Jason guy and how her friends talked about him, as if it were a joke, something to laugh about. But there was nothing amusing about what was going on. I was imprisoned in a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. And no matter how much I wanted to trust her, the pieces didn't fit. I hardly slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined her going through that door, laughing and carefree, as if nothing was wrong. Lies, secrets, and phony tears. And now there's an upcoming DNA test that might tear everything apart. When I finally got out of bed in the morning, Amanda was already up. She didn't say anything to me as she dressed, and I didn't need her to. We both knew what would happen next. This was the moment when everything would change. The ride to the clinic was completely silent. No music or small conversation, just tension thick enough to choke both of us. But amid the solitude, I knew one thing for certain. By the end of the day, I'd discovered the truth. In some ways, the clinic reminded me of a tomb, cold, sterile, and suffocating. We sat side by side in the waiting room, but the distance between us felt like miles. Amanda looked through her phone, avoiding my gaze. Her face was the perfect mask of disinterest. I had no idea what was going on in her thoughts, and frankly, I didn't care anymore. I simply wanted answers. When the nurse announced our names, Amanda stood up silently, marching toward the back, as if this was just a mundane duty she needed to complete. But it felt like my entire existence depended on this moment. The test was straightforward. Swab, paperwork completed. However, as I signed my name on the final form, my heart pounded like a drum in my chest. I looked at Amanda. She was already halfway out the door. She seemed eager to depart. I followed her outside to the parking lot, the weight of stillness between us overwhelming. We climbed into the car, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. I had 1,000 questions on my mind, but none of them mattered until the results came in. Amanda eventually spoke, ending the smothering silence. "This is ridiculous, Adam," she remarked, her voice frigid, like we were talking about the weather. "You'll feel like a complete idiot when the results come back, and you know this baby is yours." I held the steering wheel with white knuckles. "If I feel like an idiot, at least I'll know the truth." She sneered, shaking her head, her lips curled into a sour smile. "You really don't understand, do you? You're ruining our marriage with your paranoia. You should concentrate on our future, on the baby. But you're too busy playing detective." Her comments struck me, but not in the way she intended. I felt the fire of rage rise in my chest, but I swallowed it. The truth was, she stopped defending herself. It was all about turning the tables on me, and making me feel like the villain, as if I were the one tearing us apart. But after what I'd witnessed, all the lying and creeping about, how could she expect me to just sit back and pretend everything was okay? I did not respond. I didn't trust my ability to communicate without erupting. Instead, I drove home in silence, my thoughts jumbled. I kept replaying the night she returned from the party. The relaxed smile, the aroma of alcohol. Her pals made fun of him. Jason, the person who hovered in the background of everything, while Amanda pretended he didn't exist. When we arrived home, Amanda wasted no time in going upstairs. "I'm going to lie down," she said, hardly glancing at me before disappearing into the bedroom. She always retreated when things were too real. I couldn't tell if it was dread, guilt, or simply indifference at this point. I stood in the hallway for a time, staring at the closed door, unsure of what I was doing. Part of me wanted to confront her again, demanding the truth and forcing her to accept what she had done. But another part of me, perhaps the smarter part, realized that no matter how hard I pushed, she would not crack. Amanda was too skilled at this game. So I did something else. I returned to her laptop. I see now that I shouldn't have done that. But despite everything, I couldn't let it go. I needed to know what else she was hiding, and if she didn't tell me, I'd find out for myself. This time, I didn't hunt for ambiguous signals or hints. I needed something substantial, anything that would either confirm my darkest suspicions or give me reason to believe her. I opened her emails first. Nothing odd there. Then I returned to her group chat and scrolled through prior messages, piecing together the timeline. That's when I discovered it. One post was buried deep in the discussion from a few weeks ago. Megan texted her after another night out. "So, what's up with Jason? Are you planning to inform him? Tell him what?" My heart began hammering in my chest. I scrolled through Amanda's response. "Not yet. He's very suspicious right now. I need to wait." What the hell was she waiting for? What didn't she tell me? Or worse, I told Jason before I could stop myself. I scrolled through her recent photographs. I'm not sure what I was expecting. Maybe photos from the party, perhaps something innocent that I could overthink. But what I discovered made my blood run cold. There were a few photos from that night showing Amanda looking happy and carefree. Only one of them stood out. It was a photo of her and Jason, arms around each other, smiling at the camera as if it was the happiest night of their lives. And in the background, someone was holding Amanda's shoes, while she plainly plunged into the pool, pregnant, laughing, and drunk with another guy's arm around her. I closed the laptop, feeling as if I'd been taken advantage of. It wasn't just the pictures or the messages. It was everything. The lies, the manipulation, the gaslighting. I couldn't believe things had gotten to this. Amanda was not simply playing me. She was playing us both. I stood up, pacing the living room, trying to figure out what to do. Confront her again. What does it really matter? She'd deny it, change the story, cry, scream. Anything to avoid having to accept what I already knew. But what hit me worst, in the pit of my stomach, was the fear that this kid, our child, might not even be mine. And at that point, I had a realization. I was finished waiting. I'm done playing her games, done looking for a miraculous redemption. The DNA test would tell me all I needed to know, and once I obtained the results, everything would change. After I closed Amanda's laptop, the house felt strangely silent. That image of her with Jason had etched itself into my memory. Their smiles taunted me and lingered in my mind every time I blinked. I had all the evidence I needed, but it didn't seem real. There comes a time when you know your life is about to change in ways you'll never be able to recover from. And I was standing on the edge, looking into the abyss. I wasn't prepared to confront her yet, not until the DNA test findings were in hand. But I wasn't about to sit there and let her keep pretending. My stomach was screaming for me to act, to rip off the mask and force her to face the consequences of her actions. That evening, Amanda came downstairs as if nothing had occurred. She inquired whether I wanted dinner in that casual, almost robotic tone she'd assumed recently, as if she was simply going through the motions of being married. I glanced at her, trying to remember the woman I'd fallen in love with and believed I'd be starting a family with. But all I saw now was someone I didn't know, someone who had been lying to me for who knows how long. "We need to talk," I said in a calm, steady voice. The words came out sharper than I had intended. She turned her back on me as she stood at the counter, pretending to get herself a glass of water. "What is this about?" she asked without turning around. Her voice had that defensive edge again, as if she knew exactly what I was going to say and was already preparing to fight. "About Jason," I replied, the name hanging in the air between us like a grenade ready to detonate. The glass in her hand clinked against the counter as she set it down, but she didn't look at me. "I've already told you, Adam," she said slowly and deliberately. "Nothing is going on. He's just a guy. You're turning this into something it is not." I tightened my fists, attempting to contain the flood of rage that was coming down on me. "Really? Because it did not appear to be nothing in the photo I found. You two seemed extremely comfortable for being just friends." Her shoulders tensed. She eventually turned around, her gaze locked on mine. But there was no surprise, simply cold, deliberate control. "Did you go through my laptop again?" she snapped, raising her voice. "God, Adam, how many times will we have to go through this? I can't believe you don't have enough trust in me to stop." I raised my voice. "Just stop, Amanda. I've seen enough. Lies, sneaking around, and partying while pregnant. None of this makes sense. Do you expect me to believe you've been absolutely innocent throughout this? After everything?" Her face stiffened, but she refused to back down. "What would you like me to say, Adam? I'm sorry for going out with my friends. I should have told you about Jason." She threw up her hands and paced the kitchen, as if she had been wronged. "Fine, I should have told you, but I have not cheated on you. Not that it matters. You've already determined I was the villain." I chuckled, but it was painfully hollow. "You cheated on me, Amanda. Perhaps not in the way you believe, but you've been lying to me for months, hiding things, sneaking away. And now I'm expected to sit here and be completely convinced that this baby is mine." Her eyes widened, and for a moment I thought I saw a flash of panic on her face, but she swiftly recovered. Her voice hardened. "Do you really think I would be that stupid? That I would let some random stranger come between us while I'm pregnant? God, Adam, You are paranoid. All of this is in your head. My hand shook, and I could feel the final thread of control slipping away. So why are we waiting for a DNA test, Amanda? Why didn't you inform me about him from the beginning? Why hide if nothing was going on? Her silence revealed all. She looked down, her arms tightly crossed across her chest, her lips pressed together as if she was biting back whatever she truly wanted to express. And in that moment, I knew she was not going to admit it. She wouldn't confess it. She was too deep in her web of lies to ever come clean. I leaned against the counter, staring at the floor, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I'm not doing it anymore. I spoke gently, more to myself than to her. What is that intended to mean? She snapped, her tone fierce. I looked up and met her cold, angry gaze. It means that this marriage is over, Amanda. Whether the baby is mine or not. I can't keep doing this. Lying, manipulation, relentless gaslighting. I am done. Her expression changed in an instant. The fury drained away, leaving behind something I hadn't seen in a long time. Desperation. She took a stride toward me, reaching out to reduce the gap between us. But I did not move. Adam, please wait. Don't do this, she implored, her voice lower and almost shaking. We are having a baby. You cannot just walk away. I shook my head, tiredness finally setting in. Amanda, I can't stay. Not like this. I'll be there for the baby if it is mine. However, we're done. For the first time in months, I'm drawing a line. She didn't have a fast, nasty response. She stood motionless, staring at me with big, unblinking eyes. She seemed unable to understand what was going on. And for a brief second, I wondered if she'd finally give up the act, whether she'd beg me to stay and repair things. However, she didn't. Instead, she turned and stormed upstairs without saying anything, leaving me alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the debris of our marriage. And that's when it struck me. Regardless of what the DNA test revealed, this relationship was already over. The truth had rotted between us for far too long, and there was no turning back. Amanda's footsteps topping up the stairs resonated throughout the home, each step reminding me of how far we'd fallen. I stayed in the kitchen for what seemed like hours, leaning against the counter, gazing blankly at the point where we had just argued. There was nothing more to say. She had retreated to our bedroom, as she always did, leaving me in the ruins of everything she had destroyed. And in that silence, something inside me changed. Anger and sadness. They were still present, but now they were accompanied by a new sensation. Clarity. I was finished waiting for her to change, done hoping she'd confess and show some regret. No matter what the DNA test showed, I was not about to let her drag me down with her. I made a decision. I climbed up the steps, the air heavy with the seriousness of the situation. The bedroom door was closed, but I didn't care. I knocked once and pushed it open without waiting for a response. Amanda was seated at the edge of the bed, her back to me, staring at the wall. She didn't even flinch when I walked in. We need to discuss what happens next, I said, my voice quiet and almost frigid. She did not turn around. What exactly do you mean by what happens next? Her speech was flat and devoid of feeling. I mean we need to decide what to do while we wait for the results, I replied while resting against the doorframe. I'm moving out. I can't stay here any longer. That caught her interest. She spun around, her eyes wide in disbelief. You are what? The horror in her voice was genuine this time. She had not expected me to go this far. Adam, you cannot just walk away. We're about to have a baby. I crossed my arms and tried to keep my voice steady. Do you think I don't know that? But this, us, is broken. Amanda, we have been broken for a long time, and I can't keep pretending everything is fine. Not after all that has happened. Her eyes narrowed, and with that, the desperation vanished, replaced by the same cold defensive mask she'd been wearing for months. So you're gonna bail. Leave me to handle things on my own. Really classy. Adam. I shook my head, refusing to be baited. I'm not leaving. I'm giving us space. I will be there for the baby if it is mine. But I can't stay in this house with you anymore. Not with all these lies, the secrets, the way you've manipulated me." Amanda sprang up, crossing the room to be inches from me, her eyes flashing with rage. "Manipulating you?" she hissed. "Adam, you've been paranoid and controlling for months. You're the one who has been snooping on me and breaching my privacy. And now you're fleeing because you don't like what you discovered." I remained mute and let her words wash over me. She seemed unable to control herself. Every time she felt cornered, she reversed the script and made me the bad person. But I wasn't falling for it anymore. "I am not running," I replied sternly. "I am protecting myself. And honestly, Amanda, I think you should look in the mirror and ask yourself why we're even here." She crossed her arms and glared at me with all the hate she could muster. "Oh, don't put it all on me. You're the one who is walking away. You are responsible for destroying our family." I let out a bitter laugh and shook my head. "We aren't a family, Amanda. You've been keeping things from me for months. You hid your party, Jason, and now you ask me to act as if nothing is wrong. That is not family. That is betrayal." For a time, her expression softened. Just a spark of something, perhaps regret, perhaps the smallest crack in her armor, but she swiftly shut it down, moving away from me and heading to the window. "Fine," she spoke quietly with her back to me. "If it's what you seek, then go. Leave, but don't come crying to me when you discover you were mistaken." I watched her stand there, staring out the window as if none of this was important to her. It seemed as if everything we created had no meaning. Perhaps that happened to her. I wasn't sure anymore. "I'll collect my stuff tomorrow," I mentioned, my voice hard. "And I'll contact you as soon as the test results are back." She did not respond. She stood unmoving as if she had already decided the talk was done. In a way it was. We both knew it. I exited the room, closing the door behind me with finality that reverberated throughout the home. This was it. It was the end of everything I thought we had. The end of a marriage that had been deteriorating for much longer than I thought. That night, I slept on the couch and didn't bother going upstairs. I did not want to see her. I did not want to be in the same room with her. My mind raced, split between fury, grief, and something unexpected, relief. As awful as it was, this break seemed like the first significant step I had taken in months. I was finally doing something for myself, finally drawing a line. The next morning, I packed my bags and left the house without saying goodbye. Amanda did not come downstairs to stop me. I'm not sure I expected her to, but when she didn't, it reaffirmed all I already knew. It was over. I found a place to stay with a friend, somewhere I could breathe without Amanda's presence hovering over me. Now it's simply a waiting game. Waiting for the DNA results. Waiting to see if this is my baby. Waiting to see if I'll be forced to have her in my life forever. Or perhaps I can finally be free of the lies. But no matter what the results show, one thing is certain. I will not be returning to her. That chapter of my life is over. The wait was awful. Every minute seemed like an eternity. I felt like I was in some awful limbo, neither traveling forward nor backward. I had left Amanda, packed my belongings, and settled in at my friend Nick's apartment. However, it didn't feel real yet. It felt as if my existence had been halted, waiting for the one event that would either completely destroy me or set me free. The DNA test. It hung over my head every moment of the day. I attempted to distract myself by working, going to the gym, and spending time with Nick and his girlfriend. But no matter what I did, my thoughts would constantly return to it, to the question that gnawed at me like an unresolved itch. Was this baby mine? Nick was usually good about giving me space, but one night we sat down with a couple of beers, and he asked the question I had been dreading. "What happens if the baby is not yours?" He inquired, not looking at me but into his bottle, as if he already understood how loaded the topic was. I took a long swallow of my drink, trying not to respond straight away. But there was no sense in avoiding it. "I don't know, man," I admitted, my voice quieter than I had intended. "Part of me hopes it isn't. But it's a child, you know. I don't want to abandon my own child." Nick nodded without saying anything for a time. Then he looked at me, his brow wrinkled. "What if it is yours?" I sighed, sitting back on the couch and looking at the ceiling. "If it's mine, I'll care for the baby. I won't stay with Amanda, though. That's all over. But I won't abandon the child. I can't." The words seemed heavy as I spoke them, like I was bracing myself for something I wasn't prepared for. I didn't want to be bound to her indefinitely. I didn't want her manipulation and deceit to be a continual presence in my life. But if that was my child, I couldn't turn away. The following few days blurred together, a routine of waiting, overthinking, and trying not to let my emotions consume me completely. I had not heard from Amanda since I left, and I did not contact her. There was no point. We both understood that the test results would be the ultimate word. Then one morning, my phone vibrated. I was sitting in Nick's kitchen, staring blankly at my coffee when the notice appeared on the screen. "Test results are available." My stomach sank. I stared at the message for a minute before finally unlocking the phone. This was it, the moment that would determine everything. My future, my bond with Amanda, the kid she was carrying. It ultimately came down to this. With shaking hands, I clicked on the link to see the results. The screen loaded slowly. Maybe it simply felt that way because my heart was thumping so hard I couldn't hear myself think. And there it was, the answer I had been looking for. Percentage chance of fatherhood. I blinked and stared at the words, attempting to make sense of them. My mind raced, and my emotions twisted. Relief, anger, shock, disbelief. The baby was not mine. The reality struck me like a tidal wave, sweeping everything in its path. The baby, the child I had been planning to care for, raise, and take responsibility for, was not my own. Jason's face flashed through my head, and all the pieces came together. She'd been lying from the beginning. All of her justifications, denials, and feigned tears. It was all part of her sick plan. She knew. She realized the baby was not mine. She withheld it from me, attempting to imprison me in this nightmare. I stood up, my legs wobbly, and the wrath in my chest erupted like wildfire. I wanted to shout and break something. Storm over to Amanda's house and confront her with the facts. Throw it in her face and demand an answer. How could she have done this to me? How could she lie to me for so long, knowing I was about to become a father? I grabbed my phone and dialed her number, my hands shaking. She answered after a few rings, her voice icy and distant, as if she didn't expect to hear from me. "What do you want, Adam?" I took a long breath, my voice low, trembling from the wrath I was trying to control. I received the results, Amanda. There was a delay on the other end, and I could almost hear her calculating how much I knew. "And so you lied," I snapped, unable to keep it in any longer. "The baby is not mine, Amanda. Have you known this the whole time?" Silence. For a second, I assumed she had hung up. Then she spoke, her tone chilly and flat. I wasn't sure. I let out a bitter laugh and shook my head. "Bullshit. You've known. Amanda, you've known, and you led me to believe it was mine. You let me go through hell thinking I was going to become a father when it was actually someone else's child. Jason's baby." Another lapse in silence. However, this one felt different, as if she didn't care anymore. "So what? You have your answer now. What would you like me to say, Adam?" "I made a mistake. It happened. Move on." Her comments hit me like a punch in the stomach, a complete lack of remorse. She brushed it off as if it were nothing, as if I were nothing. It was too much, too cold, too brutal. "A mistake," I repeated, my voice shaking. "You lied to me, Amanda. You lied about everything. And now you expect me to move on." "Yeah," she spoke in a chilly tone. "I do. What's done is done. It's not like you're staying anyway. My grasp on the phone tightened, and my pulse raced in my ears. I'd never felt so angry or betrayed. And at that point, I realized I was finished, not only with Amanda, but with the whole twisted situation. You're correct, Amanda, I spoke, my voice hard. I'm not sticking around. You can go and establish your life with Jason. I do not want anything to do with either of you. We're finished. Before she could speak, I hung up the phone and threw it on the table, my hand still trembling with wrath. It was over. Finally. Truly over. The relief was there, barely beneath the surface, but it was obscured by a mountain of betrayal, wrath, and despair. I wasn't simply walking away from a terrible marriage. I was walking away from the future I had assumed was mine. But now I could finally move forward on my own terms. Amanda had burned everything to the ground, but I was not going to be left in the ashes. I was going to rebuild without her lies, her manipulation, and her deceit. Hanging up the phone was like breaking the last thread that connected me to Amanda. It was a bizarre, hollow sensation, as if I had just thrown away all I had imagined my life would be. But at the same time, I felt lighter, free. However, freedom was not without consequences. I sat there staring at the phone, my thoughts still racing. We had made all these arrangements. I'd started putting together the baby's room. The future, I believed, was solid. Everything crumbled in a second. Amanda's infidelity had left me devastated. However, there was no going back. Not now, not ever. I couldn't stop thinking about how she answered over the phone. No apologies, no regrets. She didn't care that she had been caught. She was just finished, just like that. She could dismiss something so monumental as a mistake. Something about just moving on left a nasty taste in my mouth. But the reality was, she had been this way for a long time. Cold, manipulative, and constantly turning things around, so I was the one questioning myself. I'd been living in a fog, thinking that maybe things would improve, that we could repair what was broken. But now there was no cloud or delusion. The truth had struck me hard, and I saw things clearly for the first time in months. I was not going to be a parent to that child, and I was not going to waste another second with Amanda. The following few days felt like gradual steps toward reconstructing myself. I stayed at Nick's, not wanting to return to the life I'd known, but I started putting things together. I canceled everything that had connected me to Amanda. We had shared everything, even bank accounts and bills. There was no point in clinging to anything anymore. I had to start over. One morning, Nick and I were sitting on his porch having coffee. It was a tranquil time. Not heavy, but pleasant. The air was fresh. The kind of September morning that makes you feel like everything is going to change, that a new season is approaching. And for the first time, I felt prepared to embrace it. "How do you feel?" Nick asked, his voice careful but curious. He had been watching me for the past 3 days, giving me space while yet keeping me grounded. I took a deep breath, looking out at the street and watching the leaves turn color. "Better," I admitted. "It's strange, you know. I expected to feel even more broken after all of this, but I'm not. I'm pissed, yes, but I feel like I can breathe again." Nick nodded. "That's the thing about being trapped in a bad situation. You have no idea how much it's suffocating you until you get out." He was correct. I had been suffocating for a long time, trapped in Amanda's lies and manipulation. I was clinging to a dead relationship before I learned about Jason, but suddenly I had room and clarity, and then came something more I didn't expect. Hope. For the first time in months, I felt like I could genuinely progress. The future I had envisioned with Amanda had vanished, sure, but there was still hope for my future, one free of her lies, manipulation, and deceit. I could rebuild. A few days later, I returned to the house for the final time. Nick came with me to help me pack the rest of my belongings. Walking into the space felt odd. This had been my home. The place where I had planned to raise a child was now nothing more than a shell, empty and cold. The air was heavy with memories of all the conflicts, lies, and betrayals. But I no longer felt sad, just a calm resolution. I packed up the last few items: clothes, books, and some personal belongings I hadn't brought with me previously. The nursery had remained unchanged since I began putting it together. I stood in the doorway for a time, looking at the crib. We had painted the walls, and I bought stuffed animals for a child who wasn't even mine. I took a deep breath and closed the door behind me. There was no reason to linger. That chapter was finished. Nick clapped my shoulder as I finished loading the last box into the car. "Are you ready for what comes next?" he asked with a grin, always an optimist. I smiled, the first genuine one I'd experienced in a long time. "Yeah," I replied, feeling the weight of everything lift a little more. "I am ready." I drove away from the house without looking back. My previous life with Amanda was over, but I wasn't grieving anymore. Instead, I focused on the road ahead. The unknown provided a sense of freedom, something I had not felt in months. I didn't have all of the answers, but for the first time, I didn't need them. In the following weeks, I began to reconstruct myself in unexpected ways. I reconnected with old acquaintances, poured myself back into work, and even began to consider what I wanted for my own future, rather than the future Amanda had planned out for me. I realized I could build it myself, one where I could be happy again. And I learned something from it all. Something I didn't see coming at first. Sometimes the people closest to you can be the most hurtful, but when they show you who they truly are, you must believe them. You cannot continue in a relationship based on lies, praying that things will change for the better. You must walk away, even if it hurts, because staying will ruin you. If I had any counsel for anyone going through what I did, this would be it. Trust your instincts. Do not overlook the red flags. Don't let others dictate your self-worth. Most importantly, don't be frightened to let go once you've realized the truth. There is life on the other side, a better life. Amanda and Jason. They can keep each other. I am done with that mess. As for me, I am moving on. It's not easy, but it is vital. And for the first time in a long time, I can envision a future in which I am not trapped in the lies of others. A future that is mine. And that is everything. Story 2. My client does not intend to divorce and has asked the court to compel therapy. She believes her marriage is strong enough to withstand this disaster, with some help. It was her lawyer speaking. My soon-to-be ex-wife, Julie's lawyer. My lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, a 12-month affair with many men culminating in the birth of a kid is hardly a catastrophe, especially when a DNA test shows that the child does not belong to my client. We see no point in prolonging this charade of marriage. Further counseling will not change anything. It is precisely because of the child that I am tempted to want counseling." The judge stated that the child needs a stable household to grow up in. "If you want me to raise this dishonest, unfaithful child." I spoke loudly. My lawyer grimaced. The judge smacked the gavel down forcefully. "One more word and I will hold you in contempt of court," he shouted at me. "I've ordered a month of counseling with 2 sessions per week, otherwise." He scowled at me for a time before slamming the gavel again. "That is all." Julie, my soon-to-be ex-wife, looked smug as I entered the counselor's office. "I am Dr. Sullivan, but you may call me Gerald." "Could I call you Brian?" He grinned at me. "No, you may not. Please address me as Mr. Stedman." "That is unnecessary," Julie began. "And you, cheater, can stop from addressing me at all." I snapped at her. "I believe we need to calm down. Please, Mr. Stedman, have a seat." He pointed at one of the chairs in front of his desk. I dragged the chair about 6 feet away from Julie's and sat down in it. Gerald sighed. "All right." Then he began. I didn't hear anything else since I removed my headphones, inserted them, and began listening to music on my phone. Gerald merely gazed at me and then began talking to Julie. I could not hear what he was saying. I continued messing with my phone and listening to music. About 15 minutes later, I noticed Julie standing up. She gave me a fierce glare as she went out of the office. I removed my earplugs. "Okay, doctor. Good session. See you on Thursday. I am terminating our sessions and delivering my report to the judge." Even better. The judge wasn't happy. "Give me one compelling argument why I should not hold your client in contempt of court," he growled at my attorney. "Your Honor, you instructed my client to attend the sessions. He attended the first session as scheduled. The counselor canceled the remaining meetings. The counselor's report plainly shows that he did not attempt to participate in the session. He wore headphones and ignored everyone the entire time." "You required him to be present," my lawyer replied. "He was present. Given that the counselor judged the sessions worthless, I would want to request that you grant the divorce petition. Not in our lifetime. I've ordered 4 more weeks of counseling. Mr. Stedman will be present and participate." The office was set up exactly the same as the first time. 2 chairs were placed about a foot apart in front of the table. The counselor sat at an empty table with only a yellow notepad and a photo of a beautiful woman around 35 and a child about 6 years old. "Mr. Stedman," he said, "please have a seat." I started moving the chair again. Julie reached out to stop me, and I stepped back. "I'm informing both of you that any physical contact will be considered an assault on my person and will be met with appropriate consequences." When I said that, Julie gasped and stepped away. I returned to repositioning the chair and then sat in it. I pulled out my phone again. "Mr. Stedman, the judge has ordered you to participate in the session." "I know. I'm recording the session using my phone to prove my participation. According to my lawyer, it is common knowledge that some counselors have personal objectives. Since my soon-to-be ex-wife has already been seeing you for some time, I believe you may have built a relationship with her that will work against me." "What if I object to having the sessions recorded?" the counselor inquired. "Then I will return to court and request a different counselor." "That's an option too. The only reason I haven't done it yet is that it would cause additional delays." "Julie, how do you feel about having the sessions recorded?" he inquired, glancing at her. "It doesn't matter," she explained, waving her hand. "Can we just start?" "All right," Gerald said. I interrupted to say what I wanted to accomplish first before we began. "Can I ask a question?" "Of course," he replied. "You may ask inquiries at any time. I may advise you to refrain from asking questions at certain points in the process, but go ahead and ask now." He finished with an encouraging smile. "Have you already slept with her?" Julie gasped, but Gerald seemed unconcerned. "No, July and I have not had and will not have sexual contact." He spoke gently. "That would be inappropriate even if I wasn't already happily married. Does this address your question?" I nodded. I believed him. He must be one of the few males Julie has met during the last year who has not slept with her. "That's all right. As I previously stated, what I would like to accomplish first is to establish our expectations. Since I've already had several interactions with Julie, I'd like her to define what she intends to accomplish in these sessions and what her intended conclusion is. I'd like to request that you refrain from making any comments or asking questions while she speaks. Once Julie has told us what she expects to achieve, I will ask you to do the same." I refrained from commenting. I did not glance at Julie when she began speaking. "First and foremost, Brian," she began, "don't speak to me." I growled. "Talk to me, Julie," Gerald stated. "Tell me what you want Mr. Stedman to hear. I want him to know that I am sorry for the anguish I have caused him. I realize I made a mistake, but he was away on business for so long and I was alone. I understand how much I wounded him, and I would do anything to undo the past. He means everything to me. I know we can get through this if he would just give me a chance. I'd show him that I can be the best wife a man could possibly ask for. We could raise our child together and offer him a great life, perhaps even a sibling. I want us to be together. I know we can do it. I am confident that we can make it through." Gerald grinned at Julie. "All right. Thank you, Julie. Now, Mr. Stedman, what do you want to say?" I glared at him. I'd like to see a festering adulteress acquire a rare and incurable disease and die slowly and agonizingly. Julie burst into tears and hurried from the room. "That didn't help," Gerald said. "I am not here to help you. That cheater spent a year sleeping with half the guys in town, became pregnant, and attempted to pass the child off as mine. If I hadn't suspected something and asked for a DNA test, I'd still be paying child support for someone else's child. Tell me, Doc, how I am supposed to feel. It's natural to be angry, but you must look beyond your anger to what you once had. Do you really know what you're talking about?" I snapped. "Have you ever had a love of your life? The person you trusted with your heart and soul? Someone you would absolutely die for? And that individual betrayed you so brutally that you began to question your own sanity. When I realized what was occurring, I wanted to die. I honestly pondered ending my life. How can someone who claims to love you create so much grief that you consider suicide? Did you also notice how she never apologized for what she did? For sleeping with so many men? For lying repeatedly about getting pregnant and not being able to figure out who the father was? Only one thing is certain. It was not me, the only person who was meant to give her a kid. So, since you have no concept of what it's like to be in my situation, don't sit there with your sanctimonious smile and textbook knowledge advising me to let go of my fury. Right now, my rage is all I have. Let me get this adulteress out of my life and try to rebuild something from the shattered bits she left behind. I hope that this counts as participation." I growled at him as I left the office. When I arrived home, I decided to prepare for the next session. Perhaps I can show my point. I requested Julie to let us have this session without her. Gerald stated when I arrived at his office the next week that I believe we would make more progress separately at first. As long as this is still considered court-mandated counseling, I'm content not to be in the same room with that woman. I sat down and placed the A4 envelope I was holding on my lap. "Could we kindly stop from name-calling? It is unproductive and simply gets in the way. I do not want to be productive. I simply want to get through these sessions and have this adulteress out of my life permanently. I never wanted these sessions. She's simply determined to bring me as much grief as possible. She does not want to divorce because the prenuptial agreement leaves her with nothing. So she is attempting to force me to take her back. That is not going to happen. So what about the child? He is innocent. Surely he should not be penalized. He is not my problem and not my responsibility. According to your logic, I should take in every stray who couldn't keep her legs closed and became pregnant. These kids have nothing to do with me. This child doesn't either. Why are you so confident there is only one outcome? You obviously loved her a lot. That kind of sensation doesn't go away overnight. Your fury is currently hiding it, but it will eventually subside, and believe me, it will. You will discover that there are still feelings to build on. Feelings that can help you heal and strengthen your connection." And the smile returned. I wanted to punch him. It was time for him to experience the consequences of his actions. I pointed to a photograph on his desk. "You have a lovely family. Have you been married long?" "We are not here to discuss my 11 years, if my sources are accurate. Childhood sweetheart, got married right after college, and waited to have children. Then tiny Ethan arrived. How old is he today?" 9. This photo must have been taken a few years ago. "How are you?" he began to say. "But did you know that sweet Cheryl harbors her own secrets? Do you know that when she claims she's going to Pilates class on Wednesday afternoons while you're at work, she's actually staying at the Motel 8 on Patterson with her personal trainer?" "That is just silly," he muttered, but I could tell he was unsure. He had become exceedingly pale. "Really?" I remarked, removing a couple of images from the envelope. I arranged them on his desk one by one. They showed a pretty skinny woman entering a hotel room beside a young, strong male. He had his arm around her waist, and they were staring at each other affectionately. I took out a DVD and put it on his desk as well. If you want solid proof of what they're doing, there's a video clip from inside the room. It's quite explicit, so if I were you, I would not watch it. I made that error when I received the private investigator's report. These images will haunt me for the rest of my life. He looked like he was about to get sick. Oh, one more thing, Ethan. No, he replied gently. Please, God. I took a DNA report out of the envelope. It appears that the fitness teacher is not the first. I think he is too young to be Ethan's father. However, you are not the father, I replied quietly. He sprang up and dashed to what I imagined was the bathroom adjacent to his office. I overheard him retching loudly into the toilet. Do you understand? I asked him as he dropped back into his chair, tears flowing down his cheeks. He stared at me with lifeless eyes. Now do you understand the anguish she caused me and why I need to get her out of my life? He nodded weakly. Good. There's one more thing you should know. He glanced at me with fear. There is more. He begged plaintively. It's all made up. None of what I've shown you is real. As far as I know, your wife is as loving and devoted as you imagine she is. And Ethan is your son. However, there is one photograph. Photoshop. It's remarkable what you can do with a few social media posts and a little time and work. If you had asked anyone even remotely competent to examine the photos, they would have told you they were all fake. I retrieved a few more images from the envelope. What? To prove it. These are the originals from which I created them. His cheeks flushed, and I worried if he was going to assault me. The DNA report. It's actually the DNA test for the child of my soon-to-be ex-wife, the cheater. I only modified the names and dates. He remained there for a few minutes, stunned, as fresh tears streamed down his cheeks. Why would you do that? What could you possibly hope to accomplish by wrecking my marriage and life? That wasn't my aim. That's why I informed you right away that everything was a lie. I never intended to do you or your family any irreparable harm. I just wanted you to really understand. For once, I felt the pain of loss, fury, and betrayal. You only felt it for a few minutes. I am still living it. Your momentary anguish is my existence both now and in the future, forcing me to sit here with that adulteress, listening to her ramble about how she loves me and wants me back. It just means I'll have to go through the anguish again and again. There are laws that prohibit cruel and unusual punishment. Why don't they apply in this case? I simply want to go on. Try to pick up what little I have left and move on with my life. Why can't you and the courts allow me to do that? I grabbed all of the papers from the desk and placed them back in the envelope. I am deeply sorry I had to do this, but I needed you to understand. I went out of his office. Your Honor, I have a report from the court-ordered counseling sessions that my client was required to attend. My lawyer spoke to the judge once more. I have a copy, the judge snarled. Even after only 3 of 8 sessions, it appears that the counselor believes that this marriage cannot be repaired for the sake of all individuals involved, including the child. The best course of action is to allow the dissolution. Yes, Your Honor, I respectfully beg that you order the dissolution of the marriage as per the petition. The judge gazed at me for a long time. I looked straight ahead, unwilling to meet his gaze. Granted, he eventually spoke, striking his gavel. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.